that proposed strategies do not violate federal law? Who were you agreeing with?
I'm not sure. It was my opinion. I don't recall that phrase. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, that's what you said. You wrote, I have reviewed the memorandum, and I agree that the proposed strategies do not violate a federal law.
That's just my personal opinion. Perhaps I just didn't write that artfully, but my opinion is that it doesn't violate the law. Okay. And that's with, I had built-in conditions. I had built-in safeguards with legal opinion, medical involvement, and so forth, and so it was not a blank check, is from what was from my view. If we did this professionally, there was a legitimate government purpose, there were safeguards, then there wouldn't be abuses. And because interrogation is always the gray area, you, unlike what Mr. Mora says, with there weren't these specific conditions, you can't come up with all the conditions of an interrogation that ahead of time you can say, when it comes to 4 days, I don't know, anyway. And so I knew that if you would do these reviews and have these safeguards in place for these interrogations, that the law would be met. And I felt very strongly about that, and I believed in my colleagues from the intelligence community that we would not allow the law to be violated or detainees to be harmed, and I still believe that today, and that's why I believe there was no violation of the law at Gitmo, despite what others may believe. Detainees were beaten to death at Bagram, Afghanistan. That happened in December, before the SecDef even had time to get out something, and the detainees were beaten to death. So it's more than just. It's more than just.
It's a sad, you know, honestly, it's a sad day in this hearing room where we say, well, it's not that bad. At least they weren't beaten to death.
No, I didn't say that, ma'am.
Well, it sounded that way.
Violated at Gitmo. Detainees were not abused. They were treated humanely within the bounds of the law.
Well, what we're trying to do, and my time's up. I'll wait for my next round, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Graham.
Thank you. Colonel Beaver, it's my understanding that the Schmidt furlough report found that in October 2002 that military working dog was used as part of an interrogation of a high-value target, and the dog was brought into the room directed to growl, bark, and show the teeth at the detainee. Is that correct?
I only heard that later. I was not aware of it at the time. My understanding of the use of the dogs, because they were bomb dogs, they were not protection dogs, were that by roaming the perimeter.
When did you leave Guantanamo?
June 2003, sir.
So this were you there in October of 2002?
No, yes, sir. I was there. I said at the time I was not aware that that happened. I found out about it later.
Do you doubt that it happened?
If an investigator found that it happened, I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying I was not aware of it at the time.
Well, so when you said this didn't happen at Guantanamo Bay, you're not right.
What I said was approved by the commander, and what was authorized by the commander did not happen. And,
well, who did this?
I don't.
Did somebody make it up on their own?
I don't know, sir. I didn't do the.
Well, the report found that it was part of an interrogation plan.
The interrogation plan that was written did not authorize the use of dogs in that manner.
Okay. This report also found that a detainee, the same detainee, was strip searched in front of female personnel. Is that right?
I heard that happened, yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know who authorized that?
I do not know.
So, based on this independent investigation, we know at least on one occasion dogs were used as part of an interrogation technique at Guantanamo Bay, and a person was stripped naked, a man stripped naked in front of female personnel at Guantanamo Bay. Is that correct?
Sir, I've heard that that's what the Schmidt-Furlow investigation found.
Okay.
I've not seen it for myself. I'm just saying I take your word for it that that's what was found in the investigation.
Mr. Mora, to wrap this up, it's my understanding that when you saw the interrogation techniques being proposed, you felt a need to speak up, and you did. You felt a need to continue to speak up, and you did. Is that correct?
That's right, sir.
And you had a lot of military lawyers speaking up to you that this is not right, what they're proposing. This creates problems. That's correct?
That's also correct, Senator.
And I think we had 35 techniques at one time, and some of your criticism was listened to, and the techniques were ratcheted down in terms of number. Is that correct?
I'm not sure about how it ended up, Senator, but if you're referring to the working group report,
this is important for later on. We had a list of techniques that Rumsfeld signed off on. Then you had pushback, and you were part of the pushback. Then they reevaluated these techniques, and Admiral Dalton, a new group came out. That's where the Joint Chiefs and others said, we need to look at this thing again, and they did.
Yes, Senator.
And as I understand it, you were never involved in any final approval of the new techniques. You were sort of shut out. Is that true?
That's correct. We were all engaged in the working draft that was to be issued on behalf of all the services. To my knowledge, I thought that the draft was never finalized, although I learned later after Abu Ghraib that, in fact, the draft was finalized. So, yes, I was not part of the final approval that led to the final working group report.
Colonel Beaver, do you ever recall General Miller going from Guantanamo Bay to Iraq as an invitation of General Sanchez?
Yes, sir. After I left Gitmo, he asked me to travel with him to Iraq in end of August, beginning of September 2003.
Now, as I understand his testimony, he went there to, General Sanchez said, we need to get better intelligence, we need to know more about these IEDs, come over here and help us. Is that the nature of the visit?
Yes, they had a number of problems, from the use of their classified network systems to just basic interrogation, and also the General Karpinski is having difficulties just in detaining Iraqis, separate from interrogation, so some military police experts were brought along.
Was there any information provided by General Miller or yourself to people in Iraq that Arabs are afraid of dogs, and one way to get information is to use dogs, or to humiliate them by taking their clothes off in front of women?
I don't recall being in a conversation that was discussed at all.
What did you tell the people in Iraq to do?
I had conversations with a number of the lawyers, Colonel Warren on down, about a number of, if you want to say, a number of different issues, not just interrogation, but even detention. I was appalled at how detainees were being held at a core holding area that Karpinski was in charge of, and the conditions were so severe and so disgusting that it was hard to believe that Americans were detaining people in that manner. And General Miller was so disgusted, he called up General Sanchez to get this corrected as soon as possible.
Thank you. Do you think it's an accident that the techniques that we're talking about in Guantanamo Bay on at least one occasion, and that's the use of dogs in interrogation and the stripping down of a detainee in front of female personnel, wound up migrating to Iraq?
I can say I was certainly surprised when I saw Captain Wood in Iraq, who had been the MI commander at Bagram when the two detainees were beaten to death, and I was shocked to see her there, quite frankly. So I know there were people that went from Afghanistan to Iraq, and she showed me an SOP that she had written that contained techniques and that she said the lawyers had approved. And so I went up the legal chain of Mark Warren's to see who had approved these, because I knew in a Geneva setting it was potentially a problem, and I brought that to the attention of Colonel Warren.